Decontamination work in Fukushima Prefecture is producing massive amounts of radioactive soil and debris. 3 years since the nuclear accident, and the waste is still piled up in residential areas. I hope it will be disposed of somewhere, but I don't know where. The disposal of contaminated waste is an urgent task for the government to rebuild Fukushima. In December, the government asked some municipalities in the prefecture to accept storage facilities.
It's indispensable for the reconstruction of Fukushima.
The government plans to buy areas around the crippled nuclear plant to build the facilities. Many residents are still living away from their homes. They know such facilities are necessary, but are somewhat unconvinced.
I miss our home, the rice paddies, and the mountains. All I can do is keep the memories of them in my heart.
The government promises that the waste will only be stored in Fukushima temporarily until its final disposal, but some residents are doubtful.
The facilities could turn out to be final disposal sites. Who knows?
Disposing of radioactive soil and debris is the key to rebuilding Fukushima. Today we'll see what's hampering the project.
Welcome to today's close-up. I'm Katsuyasu Uchida. The Fukushima nuclear accident in March 2011 released a huge amount of radiation into the environment. Work to decontaminate areas exposed to it has produced an enormous amount of contaminated soil and fallen leaves. The absence of facilities to store this huge volume of waste is hampering decontamination efforts. About 140,000 Fukushima residents are still living away from their homes. Building waste storage facilities seems vital to allow them to return as soon as possible. Under a government plan, low-level radioactive waste produced by decontamination work is temporarily stored in each community, and then transferred to intermediate storage facilities to be created by the government. Within 30 years, the waste will be disposed of at yet unspecified locations outside Fukushima. All waste produced by decontamination work will be placed in the intermediate storage facilities. Last month, the government proposed some candidate sites in the towns of Futaba, Okuma and Naraha near the nuclear plant. It plans to purchase land totaling 19 square kilometers. The government says the proposed sites will be wide enough to take in a total of 28 million cubic meters of waste. This is what the storage facilities will look like. Former residential areas will be converted to allow for the construction of different facilities that can sort low-level radioactive waste, incinerate some of it to reduce its amount, and store it. The project is estimated to cost more than $9 billion, including maintenance costs. The government hopes to start bringing in the waste in January next year, forcing people in the three towns to make a heart-wrenching decision.
Okuma town is home to the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. The town's radiation levels are so high that much of it has been designated a no-entry zone. The entire Koirino district is part of a proposed site for intermediate storage facilities. NHK asked evacuees from this community whether they accept this. Of the 43 families that used to live there, 33 responded. More than 80% accept the plan, but many said it is an extremely hard decision for them to make. They wrote, "It is hard to give up our ancestral land, but important to put to good use any land that's become uninhabitable." Some places must accept waste produced by decontamination, or there will be no reconstruction. I believe it will be almost impossible to return home. But it is still very hard to come to terms with that reality. Mitsuharu Nemoto heads the community. This is a blueprint drawn up by the government.
The nuclear plant is north.
The red areas are sites for planned storage facilities. Nemoto's ancestral farmland and a plot of land for his delivery firm both lie there.
I was speechless when I saw it.
He says he understands that Fukushima needs such storage facilities, but it is still heartbreaking.
The homes, the rice paddies, the mountains, these are the things that everybody in the community, including myself, has grown up with. These things have sort of become part of us. But now they've been contaminated and will have to be buried, covered by soil. Only their memories will live on.
One of the two other candidate towns is not a no-entry zone. Radiation levels in Naraha town are so low that the government says residents should be able to return soon. Decontamination work in the town is scheduled to end this March. The government's proposal to build a storage facility there has confused residents. Kazumi Ashiguchi is a mason. He resumed work in August 2012, soon after the government allowed residents to return home during the day. He and other residents who have begun working again worry that a waste storage facility may prevent the town's reconstruction.
Some people who have been thinking about returning home may decide not to.
Many people may change their minds. It's possible to go back and live in Naraha now. So the idea of building a storage facility there makes no sense at all.
Ashiguchi is against the plan primarily because of his children and grandchildren.
These are my grandchildren.
Since the nuclear accident, his daughter and her family have evacuated elsewhere. She says her family will not return to Naraha if the storage facility is built. My daughter has made that clear.
This is happening just when radiation levels have become so low. She and her family could come back and live with us. It's so frustrating.
Some people in Naraha say it may be in the town's own interest to accept the government's plan. Decontamination workers spend a lot of money in the local supermarket. Supporters of the plan say the construction of a waste storage facility will bring in more workers and help revive the local economy. The town is divided on whether to accept the government's plan.
I don't deny that Fukushima needs the intermediate storage facilities, but Naraha is a place where radiation levels are now so low that people are looking to return. I want the government to keep this in mind.
Joining me are Senior Vice Environment Minister Shinji Inoue and NHK reporter Kei Nakazawa. Mr. Inoue, residents of the towns asked to accept radioactive waste understand that storage facilities are necessary to rebuild Fukushima, but if they accept them, they'll lose their hometowns. What do you think about this dilemma?
It pains me to think of those who are going to lose their hometowns. I've been visiting Fukushima every week since assuming my current post. The NHK survey in your report said 80% of residents support having a storage facility in their community, but it was a difficult choice. I would call their support passive support. They will have to shoulder the heavy burden of accepting contaminated soil and other radioactive waste from elsewhere in Fukushima. We want to win their understanding by clearly explaining why the facilities are needed and how the government will ensure their safety.
Officials and residents of Naraha are aiming to return to the town at an early date, but some say evacuees won't come back if there is a storage facility. Why did the government choose a town where preparations to return are underway?
We chose the candidate sites by asking experts to consider various factors, such as the distance from places where a massive volume of contaminated soil has been removed, because we don't want to transport it over long distances. The experts also considered whether the candidate sites have solid ground or sufficient space for storage. It's true that radiation levels in Naraha are slightly lower than those in Okuma and Futaba, but we do not think that Okuma and Futaba are uninhabitable. We would allow the evacuees to return home if they want to. Some people will be able to come home relatively soon, while others will have to wait longer. The conditions for returning home aren't that different in each town. The government didn't choose candidate sites based only on the current radiation levels.
Residents are concerned about the safety of the facilities. How is the government addressing this?
A panel of experts established by the government held 9 meetings to discuss safety from various perspectives. We are confident that there will be no safety issues. We plan to hold a briefing for residents and give full explanations to ease their concerns.
Mr. Nakazawa, what is the biggest concern for residents of the towns chosen as candidate sites?
What worries them most is whether the facilities are really temporary. They think the facilities could end up becoming final disposal sites. Please take a look at this. The government has found no place to build final disposal sites, which is why residents are worried that radioactive waste will remain in their hometowns. One respondent of our survey in Okuma gave this answer. No one will agree to host a final disposal site. I think it will be impossible to build such a facility. The government says it will move radioactive waste out of Fukushima within 30 years, but no one knows what will happen in the future. I've been reporting in Fukushima and found that people are very attached to their homeland. They want to protect their land, fields, and graves they've inherited from their ancestors. Many people told me that even if they cannot return, they want their children or grandchildren to do so. They have mixed feelings about whether to accept storage facilities, which the government says are only temporary. If the facilities become final disposal sites, it's a completely different matter.
Well, thank you, Mr. Nakazawa. The government needs to find locations for final disposal sites to make sure that the proposed facilities in Fukushima are temporary. But finding communities willing to help is a very difficult task. NHK obtained a recording of an Environment Ministry briefing on storage facilities held last year. The facilities could turn out to be final disposal sites. Who knows?
The most painful thing for me is having to answer questions on final disposal sites. I think we can only proceed with tacit mutual understanding without mentioning the words intermediate or final.
The official didn't answer the question clearly. The government proposed intermediate storage facilities 5 months after the nuclear accident. Then Prime Minister Naoto Kan mentioned the idea during a meeting with Fukushima Governor Yuhei Sato.
We have no choice but to ask for permission to build intermediate facilities to store radioactive waste in Fukushima.
The proposal came out of the blue for the Environment Ministry that thought Fukushima would be the location for final disposal. The Prime Minister's suggestion of intermediate storage was totally unexpected.
The ministry had absolutely no idea about locations for final disposal sites outside Fukushima.
Why did the government use the word intermediate? Tetsuro Fukuyama was in charge of handling the aftermath of the nuclear accident under Prime Minister Kan. He says the government had no other choice at the time.
People living near the nuclear plant were forced to evacuate, and their prospects of returning home weren't good. Under such circumstances, the government could not bring itself to say it wanted Fukushima to be the final disposal site for radioactive waste.
In addition, many places in Fukushima were found to have relatively high levels of radiation. Removing and disposing of radioactive materials was becoming an urgent task. So the government proposed building intermediate storage facilities in Fukushima by promising that the waste would be removed in future.
We didn't know where to build final disposal sites, but had to deal with contaminated waste and move it somewhere to make progress in allowing evacuees to return home and carry out reconstruction projects. That's why we asked Fukushima to accept intermediate facilities.
Government officials began looking for possible sites outside Fukushima Prefecture. They first set their eyes on a town in the southern island of Kyushu. Minami Osumi town is depopulated and struggling financially, so the government secretly asked municipal authorities for help. Residents soon found out about the talks and opposed the plan.
We want to help the people of Fukushima rebuild their hometowns, but this is a separate matter. I'm sure the government would not think of bringing the waste to a rural town like ours if the waste really was safe.
Negotiations failed. Later, there was a change of government. The candidate's site has yet to be found. It says the facilities to be built in Fukushima are only for temporary storage, and promises to dispose of the waste elsewhere within 30 years. But some officials say there may be no need to move all of the waste out of Fukushima, as radiation levels would fall in future.
It's physically impossible to take all the waste out. Besides, the radiation levels in the waste may fall below the safety level in 30 years. So I don't think we need to remove everything.
One government official said the radiation level may fall below the safety standard in 30 years' time. Does the government assume some waste will remain permanently in Fukushima?
Well, the radiation level will fall over time. Our estimate shows that it will naturally decrease by 60% over 30 years. But that doesn't mean we are allowed to leave radioactive waste in the intermediate storage facilities in Fukushima Prefecture. We promise to remove it within 30 years, and we will fulfill our commitment. The local people's concerns are understandable, but it's not impossible to move all the waste from decontamination work out of Fukushima. We must tell residents about our project, such as how we choose the sites for the intermediate storage facilities and how we will transport the waste out of Fukushima in future.
The government is preparing a law as well?
The Cabinet has already approved of the project, but we will also enact a law to make clear the government's responsibility. I think that would send out the message that the government is serious.
Let me confirm. Will all the waste be moved out of Fukushima within 30 years?
Well, that's what we need to study from now, whether we can utilize the waste as a recycled resource if its radiation level falls sufficiently, because most of the waste is soil. Of course, the waste should be moved out of Fukushima if it's still highly radioactive after 30 years. But by that time, we can also anticipate that technology will advance to reduce the volume of waste.
Other important challenges include how to dispose of the waste and where, right?
Yes. To be honest, it's not easy to find answers to those questions, so we should start by drawing up a timetable of the project, such as how long we should spend on the process before final disposal.
1 month has passed since the Environment Minister Nobuteru Ishihara asked towns to host the facilities, but no meeting with residents has been held. Why?
We should first win the understanding of local authorities before holding a meeting with residents. At the moment, we are asking the authorities to allow us to explain our plans to residents.
What makes the authorities reluctant?
There are probably different reasons in different communities. I think one of the first things they want to do is to talk to the residents themselves about how to proceed.
Is there a rough schedule for the meetings?
Not yet. Without intermediate storage facilities, we cannot increase the number of initial storage sites or promote decontamination work. So we are asking local authorities to allow us to hold a briefing as soon as possible.
The first batch of waste is due to be taken to an intermediate storage facility in January next year. Is that possible?
It's not totally impossible. We're not thinking about starting the work once all the facilities have been built, as some might assume. We are trying to start with something that can be done now, such as transporting small amounts of waste.
Well, thank you, Mr. Inoue.